Hello, everyone. Welcome to Monday Night Chat with SK. And tonight we're going to be discussing how to cope with uncertain times, how to build resilience and sustain while going through the things that usually take us off our feet, and how to give yourself grace to create a safe space in your environments while you navigate through your solutions. I want to talk about how to evaluate, how to compartmentalize, and how to rate your crisis, because at times we think that something is really, really big because we haven't yet evaluated the circumstances and we don't have a solution. So it seems like such a big thing is happening, and you put so much effort and time and emotional labor into finding resolution or just being in the thing that you kind of overexalt yourself. I'm going to teach you and talk through how to let the crime match the punishment, because at times we're beating ourselves up for situations that actually had nothing to do with us, but because we feel this emotional pain, we kind of put ourselves in life sentences or death sentences sometimes, emotionally, because we haven't really rated those crises in a fair way to really evaluate how much of time and attention we need to put to it, or emotional labor. I have my good friend Danik Sakar here with me tonight to discuss this conversation. She's going to talk through some of the ways that she either personally coped or things that she knows about, in ways that coping can support through those tough times. We are living in some uncertain times right now. Some of these things we can control, some of them we can't. But we want to make sure that we're rating and evaluating said crises in a way that really really gives us value, not break us apart and self-destruct and self-sabotage our emotional health. Denix, I want to give you an opportunity to share, again, your name and your background professionally, where your knowledge is coming from, and just one thing that people should like keep their mindset on while we have this conversation.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Danixa Carr. I am a licensed school counselor in Northern Virginia, and the age group that I currently work with and serve are fifth and sixth graders. I've worked with students across the lifespan, everything from like our littles, our pre-K folks, all the way up to our 12th graders. And something that I think that would help us be grounded in our conversation tonight is understanding that different things work for different people. And also the concept of mental health. I like to think of it as mental wellness. How well are we mentally, and what are the things that can either affect that? And that looks different for a lot of people.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Danixa, for sharing that. Yes, Danixa is a NYU graduate. She has her master's in the world of mental wellness. And so, in just, guiding our youth in how to manage, career building, educational planning, just emotional wellness in itself. Like that is a whole job in itself, right? A lot
Yeah.
of times you can have all these big dreams and aspirations in life, but if your emotional health is not in a space where you can be fair to yourself, a lot of times it gets in the way of those dreams and aspirations, and you feel like, oh, I'm falling behind, but in reality you just didn't have the emotional intelligence to see you through from one point to the next point. And it just takes a little mindset shifting, and you'll start knocking them goals out the park. But a lot of times we think it's the doing that gets in the way, and sometimes it's the feeling that gets in the way of the doing. Um, but I want to ask you, Denixa, like I said, I wanted us to kind of like have a conversation about how we evaluate crisis or how we evaluate um, emotional pain. In your, and you don't have to give like the dictionary version of this, but, in your own words, what would you constitute as a crisis?
I think a crisis would constitute, excuse me, anything that causes significant impairment in not only daily functioning, but it really impacts what your concept of a life worth living is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you feel like, both either for yourself or if you were working with a student, like what is some ways that you would kind of like foster a conversation around rating your crisis to make sure that the crime fits the punishment? Like, what is the first step you think needs to happen in that?
I think the first step I like to do, I'll speak first, like on my day to day, I like to ask my students, how are you doing? And or tell me more about what's going on, and then really listen to what they're trying to say without interruption so that I can understand what the problem is. And then from there, use a rating scale. Sometimes I like to add humor because sometimes it can get a little bit heavy. So I
Mhm.
like to do the 1 to 10 rating scale. And I'll usually say, okay, 1 being like, I can't do this, like, this is impossible, all the way up to 10, like, yeah, I got this. And really asking the student and sometimes asking myself, where do I fall on that line? And then from there, we can talk more about, okay, what does, for example, being at a 5 look like?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And like, do you feel like, I know for me personally, when I've done things like that, it helped to ground me because I told someone before, I said, listen, everything can't be a 10.
Right.
Everything cannot be a 10. Because if you're saying not getting your paycheck on time is a 10, then being homeless is a what? Or
Exactly.
losing a job is a what if getting your paycheck a couple of days late is a 10. And that's kind of like what we're talking about in like rating your crisis, because if you put everything at a 10, you'll always be in survival and crisis mode. But if you evaluate and rate your crisis or your challenges fairly, right? It doesn't mean if you rate having your paycheck late a 1 or a 2 that it's not important. It just means that it doesn't require the amount of emotional labor that you will put into a 10. It doesn't require the same anxiety, fear, or stress that you will put into a 10. And when you rate it like that, it kind of soothes your shoulders down. Like, this is a 1, right? I can handle a 1, and I know the Nixon scale was kind of like the other way, like where 1 was like, I can't take this, and 10 was like, but what I'm saying is like, if I'm saying 1 is manageable and 10 is absolutely unbearable, you cannot rate everything a 10 because everything is not a 10. And I found myself in the past doing that.
Yeah.
Every minor, little, big inconvenience would be a 10. I needed to, I would be crying. I would be emotional. I'll be frustrated. I'll be stressed beyond measure. I'll be getting a headache. My blood pressure rising because everything seemed to have felt like a 10. But when I started to kind of like manage it differently and say, okay, this is a minor inconvenience. This is a 1 or a 2, right?
Yeah.
You know, and like Denixa said earlier, these things are different for everyone, right? I'm not saying that you can't view not having your funds as a 10. Let's say not having your funds in 2 days, right? Your rent is due, and there are other factors that surrounds that late delay. It could very well be a 7 or an 8 because of the other things that it impacts. However, even with that, you want to do that fairly. Okay, it's not a 2 because there are other factors in it, but it's not a 10 because there is a solution. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like, like situationally, things can, the rate or the I guess the esteem on a particular situation can change based on other circumstances?
Yes, because going back to your example, if let's say someone's paycheck is late and they have other things coming up, other responsibilities, it would be heartless to be like, no, that's more like a 4. You tell anybody that, you'll take them to a 10 because you
Mm-hmm.
just invalidated their feelings and also their lived reality. Like,
Mm-hmm.
feelings are important, yes, but like tangible things like, okay, this is happening, that is happening, to say like, oh no, that's okay, and then to just go into solution mode, you just basically told a person that they can't feel the way that they're feeling
Mm-hmm.
and what they're feeling is wrong.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I think these things are more of an internal thing. Because as a coach or a therapist, I wouldn't, and I'm not a therapist, but I wouldn't necessarily tell someone that there's a 2. I would ask, I would educate them on how to rate it, right?
Hmm.
Like we said, like education, like educating someone on how to rate it, like what it could look like, what it sounds like, right?
Yeah.
And then allow them, like you said, that space to place it where it needs to be, right? But when
Right.
people don't have tools for these things, everything becomes a 10.
Right. Like I've noticed that with especially, I love my sixth graders and fifth graders, but they'll come in and it seems like everything is a 10. And we're like, okay, like let's go through the problem. And they're like, oh, okay. I'm more feeling like a 6 or a 7.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
If we're at a 6 or a 7 and that's where you're at. You got to meet yourself where you're at instead of trying to say like, "Oh, I shouldn't feel this way," or like, or what I'm feeling is wrong. Like, no, I'm at a 6, I'm at a 7, and it's okay if I stay there for today.
Right. And one of the other things that I discovered in my own journey, like I talk a lot about my journey because I don't necessarily work with a lot of people. I do talk with a lot of people. I want to say on a given week, I probably am supporting like 3 or 4 people, right? And that sounds small when you're like, oh, 4 people, that's not, but it's big when you're living life, right?
Yeah.
For additional people to have emotional connection with, or like navigating emotions can be a lot. And that's why I'm so glad that I've learned how to um manage my boundaries and how to self-soothe. And that's why I'm like so passionate about these tools, because I know how they have impacted me. So for today, right, I had a few things going on. I had some really exciting things happen for me. I was like, go me, go me, go me. And I had some minor inconveniences happen. Now, in the past, right, when a minor inconvenience would come up, I would just feel like the world is falling down on me. Here comes that shoe. Everything always happens to me. My life is in shambles. I would go through this spiral of what's next, what's next, what's next. I will start scanning for things to go wrong. Like, oh, I bet you this is gonna happen. And when somebody called me and said, "Oh, I knew it," and I start using these self-fulfilling prophecies that only bad things happen to me. But because of the work of self-reflection and opening my mind up to the space of like creating an environment where I can compartmentalize these things, I allowed so many different inconveniences to happen today. And I was just like, you know what? It is what it is. you know what? I can't control this in this moment. There's nothing I can do about it. The things that I could do, I tried, right? But I was so proud of myself that I didn't crash and burn. Like, even with, it's like when I tell you so many things just went haywire today, even to the point of like Monday night chat, like the day was just going, going, going. And then I got, hey, text messages about cancellation and lateness and things. And I'm like, I'm not going to crash out. I'm not going to crash out. I am not going to allow these inconveniences to tell me a narrative that everything is going wrong. These particular situations have to be addressed, but the world is not falling apart. I'm still standing. I'm still breathing. I'm still here. There's a solution, and, or not. But it took me so long to get to this place. If this had happened to me, these things, because it was a lot, I was just like, I was actually laughing at it at one point in the day. I was just like, got to be kidding me. And but if you had caught me probably like a year or so later, I'll be kicking into it. I liken myself to Scrappy Doo, the little Scooby that used to be kicking and stomping. I always liken myself to that because that's what I be looking like, just stomping like, because my day is inconvenience. But it's understanding, and that cliche statement like this, what is it something about control, and what is the statement the next time?
Oh man, I think
know the difference between the things you can control.
Oh, the locus of control.
The serenity prayer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't quote it right now, y'all, but y'all know what it is.
Yeah.
I'll quote it one day. But it's like thinking about it in that retrospect, but, and I know that's a little cliche, but it helped me to like really be like, there's nothing right now in this moment I could do about any of this. So why am I going to worry? Why am I going to worry? My new thing is worry is a liar. And worry loves to lie and tell you all these different stories about what's going on. And we listen to worry like, why do you want to hang out with a liar? Worry is a liar. Anybody else lie to you, you'll be pissed off. But worry will tell you that your life is in shambles, that you're a nobody, that you're not good enough, that you're going nowhere, that all your problems are your fault. Worry will tell you that you're going to get evicted. Worry going to tell you that you're going to lose your job. Worry going to tell you that you're hungry. Worry going to tell you you ain't going to have no drawers to wear next week. Worry will tell you all sorts of things. Worry will tell you your friends don't like you. Worry will tell you your man is cheating on you or your girlfriend talking about you. Worry will tell you so many lies, and you sit there and you listen to worries gossip about you and your family and your close loved ones, and you go along with it. And then what you do, you don't even get mad at the people. You get mad at yourself. You start beating yourself up. Oh, I should have known better. I should have done better. And worry's like, ha ha ha, got you again. So it's like, so my question to you, Denise, because I've been talking for a little bit. Do you feel like you have to solve problems right away? Or like if someone came to you and they're like, oh, I got this issue, do you feel like people benefit from solving problems right away? Or do you think there's benefit in taking steps away from circumstances for more clarity?
Yes. Similar to yourself, if you had asked me a year ago, I'd be like, yeah, fix. And that just doesn't help. It just doesn't. Sometimes just like sitting with the problem, like, okay, this is the problem, helps you to understand like what it is without trying to fix it, because you're right, some things involve more questions, more research, or just more time to process what is happening, and going straight into fix it mode. And I know sometimes as ladies, we can do this, like, yeah, here's a problem. Oh, let's fix it. No.
Mm-hmm.
sometimes a person just wants you to just sit there and listen.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Mm-hmm.
really helps because, one, it gives people agency that, hey, they can solve the problem. They don't need you to solve the problem. And working with kids has really helped my understanding of that because it really helps when they, especially at that age, they feel like no one's listening to them, no one cares. Just to have that listening ear is just like, wow, okay, here's someone who gets me and it's just not trying to fixing. And just that processing is literally the first step. It's like, for example, you're playing a video game and you want to be level 99 and you just started. It's like there's so many steps that you have to take to get to level 99, and each step deserves to be honored, investigated, questions asked, and even sometimes just sitting with the feeling like, damn, this sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And you allow yourself to be human instead of just like fix, 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 and rush, rush, rush. Like now, if something's broken, like if you drop something, yeah, fix it. But sometimes, like those issues and different things in life are just not that simple, and that's okay. That's just part of us being human.
Right. I'm learning so much in my communications class about these different things. And it's so funny because I take psychology 101 and comms 102. And it's so funny that they kind of like meet like in the middle. Like in psychology, we're talking about how the brain and the body responds to certain things. And in comms, we're showing how that shows up in real time. Right. And so it was one of the lessons we were learning around perception. And in psychology, we talk about perception. We talked about, neurons and, how the brain processes perception and what type of memory cells and things it uses to build perception. And then in our comms class, we were talking about how perception kind of influences decision making. And a lot of times we perceive something to be big. And so our emotions follow that perception, right?
Yeah.
And so we've been operating like that, like on autopilot, right? But a lot of times, where does that perception come from? Right? It comes from our upbringing. It comes from our memories, especially if you grew up in poverty, right? Anything that resembles that environment, you freak out, right? Because that's your perception of these type of situations. Not having money could lead to homelessness, could lead to XYZ, da da da. And you go into this whole spiraling. And what I also understand about perception is that you can change your perception, right? But it's so funny how in the past, I didn't think of the one key thing that has now changed my perception is that with all that I went through in my life, I got through it. I'm on the other side of it. So when crisis comes up, I try to bring that perception into my viewpoint that not that I've been through some tough times, but I've gotten through, past, they're over, I've conquered. And that perception is what keeps me grounded and kind of like helps me to soothe myself as I go through. And I don't want anybody to think that, oh, well, Shimona, you got it all together. Oh, no, no, no. There are times when I go down that little rabbit hole and I'm just following it, panicking and freaking out. I was so proud of myself this morning because in the past, I suffer with anxiety really bad. And before, I want to say last year was probably the last time, probably like around, no, I'm going to say early this year, I started to feel relief. But I used to wake up literally from my slumber with heart palpitations and feeling petrified over nothing. Like nothing is happening. And I would wake up in a panic, like I would feel like I'm late for something or I forgot something. I used to have mental visions of me forgetting to do something really important and not remembering what it was. And I would freak completely out. And then I would start beating myself up. I'm irresponsible, blah, 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 and have no clue what I'm irresponsible about. And my anxiety would just build these stories in my head. And I would wake up in this panic. And doing this self-reflection and finding balance and finding a new way to allow my brain to process my space, I no longer wake up with a panic. I wake up like Cinderella. You know how the birds is chirping and they like carrying her dress to her. That's how I wake up now. And I was like so excited this morning. But that doesn't come without um challenges. The challenges still show up. They still show up, but I take them when they come. Before I used to future trip. I need to know about what's happening the next day, the next day, the next day, the next day, the next day. A problem happened, I'm already 3 months in advance. My worry is already in this, if I don't get a job, I'm not going to be able to buy Christmas gifts. And it's January. Like, what? That's a whole year from now. What? Like, get it together. And so, like, what do you feel? Like, what is your biggest coping mechanism for when you're in those uncertain times? Like, what is your go-to thing to do?
For me, a key component is mindfulness. I love mindfulness. I was introduced to the idea from my internship supervisor at the high school site I worked at John Dewey, and she had been certified in mindfulness. And when she would lead case conferences, we wouldn't just dive in talking about our students. We would do that self-check-in first. And mindfulness is such a big word. People think it's yoga. People think it's spiritual. It can be those things, but mindfulness can be thought of as two things. It can be focused attention. So for some folks, that could be cleaning. If they've had a stressful day, they'll be like, you know what? I'm just going to clean and focus on what I'm cleaning, every surface, and really dive into that. And then for some, it's just being in a flow state and grounding yourself in the present moment. For me, I love the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding exercise. I'm trying to remember all the other components, but the 5 things you see is really key, because sometimes like anxiety or worry can pull us out of the present, and we're not noticing or reacting to what's going on in our environment. So sometimes I'll tell myself, okay, 5 things you name. Even sometimes it's just naming 5 things. Okay, I named the door, the chair, my phone. And I realize in doing that, I'm pulling myself back. It doesn't mean that my problems instantly go away, but I'm more aware and more grounded. I love breath work. It's still a practice for me, but I'm getting to a point where if I'm like, okay, I notice I'm not okay, let me start doing rainbow breathing. And rainbow breathing can be you just inhale, bring your arms up, and then exhale on the way down. And it's something that is also simple for kids too, because that simple movement and that breath connects you to the present, because sometimes when we're worried or stressed, we have those changes like rapid heartbeat, or we're breathing really shallow breaths, and just those things can help pull back into the present. And it's not so much saying like, okay, I do breath work, all my problems are done, I'm good. It's like, okay, I'm now back in my body, and now I can look at the problem objectively, instead of like catastrophizing, going like, oh my gosh, what if, because you're right, worry will lie to you. Like I've seen, I'm going off a little bit on a tangent, but this one, I think it was a post on Twitter, and it showed 2 sizes of rocks. It shows on one end was like a really big rock that showed, and underneath it, the caption was anxiety. And then the second one was a smaller rock that says what the problem actually is. And it's super helpful, because when you get to that second part how big the problem actually is, it's still a problem. It's not like, okay, the problem's gone away, but it's more manageable or it's more smaller. And then you can go into, okay, how can I tackle this? What are my next steps? So going back to your original question, breath work and mindfulness is so key. And it really helps me when I'm going through like those tough moments. And also, it helps me when I'm working with kiddos so that they can start to think, oh, okay, like, yes, there still is a problem, but it's either manageable or, okay, what questions does still need answering, or what questions do I still need to ask myself?
Right. And the other thing is like, and thank you for sharing those. I think it's 5 things you can see, isn't it? 4 things you can touch,
Yeah.
and I think all of your senses are involved. I remember I did something where it told me to place my feet flat on the ground, and imagine, like kind of like evaluate the surface that I'm on as strong, and try to like absorb its like element. Like if my feet is on the ground and the ground is solid, like kind of bring that into my body, that grounding. But when I used to call 988, because that was like my go-to thing. If I'm like having big emotions, I would call 988. And it's funny, like sometimes they'll have you waiting and they had that music on. We care about you and da, da, da. And like it depends on how big my emotions are. Like the music will be helpful, but if they're like so big and I just need to talk and get it off my chest, I would be so irritated, like, shut this music up. I need to I need to talk to somebody now. But I remember my counselor had taught me skip counting. And basically you have to say numbers, but you can't say them in a pattern. They can't be synchronized. They can't be like in any type of like order. And so you're like 100 to 25, 40, 16, 99. And it kind of forces you to start thinking about placing the numbers and not having a pattern that you forget, or at least you step away from the current problem at the time because you're so focused on getting those numbers. And I remember when I first tried it, I used to struggle. Now I can do it more fluently because I do it often. But when I feel big emotions and I'm like, I can't think through things, I'm like, really, really upset, I'll just start skip counting, and it helps to soothe the anxiety. But I know we're talking about coping skills. A lot of people don't even know that they're in crisis,
Yeah.
right? A lot of people don't know that when to turn on the tools. And so, what do we say to people who haven't yet identified that these big emotions exist and that they can be soothed? Like what is, like, if you, let's say you have a student who hasn't yet been aware of mindfulness or coping or even how to identify emotions, what would be something that you would say to them? What is the first thing you would say?
I would start with validation. It's okay that you're feeling the way you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And even just that, even if the student is not in that space, somewhere inside they're like, wait a minute, what I'm going through, like, I'm not, being demonized. I'm not being told, oh, get over it, you'll be okay.
Or calm down. I hate
Oh,
calm
oh gosh, calm down. That is the worst thing you could tell someone, is to calm down, because it's almost like, well, who are you to tell somebody to calm down? You're not in their shoes. You haven't lived their life. You haven't gone through what they've gone through. So to tell them to calm down, you're going to only calm down. They're going to be further escalate. They're going to be like, they're going to go into defensive mode.
down.
Like, calm down. Who is this lady or who is this counselor telling me to calm down? But sometimes it's how you say it too, because therapy jargon is everywhere, and it's important to use real world terms like, yeah, that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know what? I'd feel that way too.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps people, because people, especially kids, don't want to feel like they're being dissected or analyzed. It's like, no, like, I'm here bearing witness with you. I'm staying in this moment with you. And I think for some, and I've noticed it for some students, especially students who come in and they're a little bit skeptical and they're like, oh, okay, like, who's this lady? Or like, why am I here? Like, just that simple validation, like, yeah, that sucks, or that's horrible, or I feel that way too,
Mm-hmm.
can help them feel like someone's walking beside them instead of trying to fix them.
Mm-hmm. And it's a very delicate thing. And I think that, my statement has always been prevention is better than cure. And I think that is really important that we continue to educate on emotions. Like we were talking about emotions. There's a whole chapter in Markham's book about emotions. And it was so funny that my group project was on that particular chapter. And I remember when we started talking about not emotional intelligence, when we were talking about, emotional intelligence, I actually got it wrong. And I was so freaked out. Like, how did I get that wrong? And I understood it conceptually. I didn't understand it academically. And it has layers to it, right? And there was something else that I learned, that transactional communication is not without emotion. Transactional communication is actually more thoughtful and more connected than most communication. And I have been feeling, or I have been conceptualizing that transactional communication was like, an interaction that was just one person talk to another, which actually is transactional communication. And so I say that to say that a lot of times when we are experiencing emotions, right, and we're having these interpersonal interactions with people, sometimes another person's response can either make your emotions escalate or de escalate. And when I now know the difference between transactional and interactive, in transactional communication, you're co-creating the meaning, whereas you're not telling someone how to feel. You're both experiencing that experience together, and you're knowing your role in this transaction of communication. You're knowing your role as the supporter and their role as the communicator, and giving and using that space to help them to create what they're experiencing. And I was like, what? And what I also learned in working with people is that in those conversations, that telling someone to calm down is not a good idea. But also at the same time being able to manage the environment, not fix, but manage the environment so you or the other person won't experience harm. And that is a very delicate dance, because if someone is like irate, you want them to calm down, but you don't want to say calm down, right? And I think what I usually do is I allow that person space to feel and experience that rage. Because what you don't want to do is have them suppress it, and then they never process, and then they keep repeating the behavior. I told a group, we did a training on emotional intelligence, and I said one of the emotions that gets the most slack and gets policed the most is anger, but it's a natural emotion.
And it's also a secondary emotion too, because sometimes, like, depending on gender, but just in general, like, anger is such a quick emotion that it demands immediate results. It's like, yo, I'm
Mhm.
angry. This needs to be fixed now. And I know I've worked on my relationship with that emotion. And I tell my students, I'll never tell you not to be angry,
Right.
especially in this space, but it's how we express it that can determine, okay, our consequences. Are there certain things that we can walk back? Like if a student's really irate and they're really upset, okay, telling them that it's okay to be upset is okay. And being angry is okay. But what's not okay is to just storm out of the class or yell at the teacher, because then, even though that wasn't your intent to be mean to the teacher, the impact on the teacher is, wow, this student just left my class. I understand they're upset, and it decreases understanding. And sometimes anger is a secondary emotion to hurt, frustration.
Mhm.
I love the feelings wheel. Sometimes I
Yep,
use it
I
on
love the
myself
feelings well.
because, like, I love, I love when my students say, yeah, I'm about to crash out. I'm like, okay, I understand we're using this common internet terminology, but
Mhm.
let's define what crash out really means.
Yep,
Okay, we're
because it
upset.
means something different for different people.
Right. Are you furious? Are you irate? Are you annoyed? Are you hostile? And really just being able to name it is like, whoa, okay, here's where I'm at right now. And that's all right. And going back to telling someone, okay, you shouldn't be angry, you want to make it's like, congratulations, you just taken that person who was a 6, now they're at a 9, because they're
Mhm.
like, how dare you? And
But
it's
it's usually because the person is uncomfortable. Like,
right.
one of the things we talked about was like, you have to check your biases at the door and realize that you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in these spaces, because someone's anger will make you uncomfortable, especially if you're susceptible to anger, right? Like,
Yeah.
you could be someone who doesn't like conflict. You can be a survivor of domestic violence or something, and so you're when someone's experiencing anger, it could make you uncomfortable. But you have to, in this space, right, acknowledge that, check your bias, and communicate what you need. But what you can't do is tell someone to calm down because it makes you uncomfortable.
Right, because then it's like you're making the interaction about you instead of saying, "Okay, well, let me check myself. I'm uncomfortable with anger." And
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes the first step in fixing something is acknowledging it, and then in doing so helps to increase capacity to support people
Mm-hmm.
and helping them work through those emotions, and then realizing we all experience it. It's
Mm-hmm.
not so much, okay, this person, we all do. There are just certain things. Sometimes we're wired that way. That's
Mm-hmm.
just what it is. Sometimes you're pushed that way. That's just what it is. And being okay with that, I think, allows us to be not only more human, but more present with that person so that they can be present with their emotion.
Yeah. And one thing I was like, and I'm trying to build a framework around this, and I'm sure there's some out there, is building an emotional safety plan. And that goes into understanding your triggers, that goes into what of course of action am I going to do when I'm feeling like that discomfort, right? Say I'm in the middle of conflict, what is my emotional safety plan? Right? Do I engage? Do I ask for space? Do I leave the room? And I dream of a time where students and teachers, right? And, just in the space of like talking about that, where students and teachers can have a conversation about their emotional safety plan. That way, both teacher and student, right, can feel grounded in their emotions. Like, say, I am a student and I'm angry and I need to get out of the class. As my teacher, we've discussed my emotional safety plan. And in order for me to feel safe and balanced again, I need to separate myself from the room. Don't take this personal, right? And as
Right.
a teacher, because I know I've communicated to my student my emotional safety plan. I don't want to be disrespected. I don't want to feel like you're dismissing me. So when you need to exit the room, just say, hey, I need to execute my emotional safety plan. Right.
Right.
And, and that way, oh, this is not about me. The student needs to do this in order to make themselves feel safe. And in that emotional safety plan, they can say, well, when I'm exiting the room, I'm going to Miss Denixa, right?
Yes.
To, balance myself out. But it's having that conversation and building those emotional safety plans so everyone is aware of how the environment is transitioning. And these things can be used in relationships.
Yes.
And friendships. This is my emotional safety plan. When I say sharks, that means we need to stop the conversation and give me 5 or 10, or I need to take a walk. But we're not discussing our emotional safety plans. We run the risk of conflict, creating uncomfortable spaces, emotionally unsafe spaces. And so like I said, I'm working on the framework for it. I'm sure there's some out there, but I really want to really start promoting that structure for folks, because I think it's going to be a game changer.
It is like going back to your earlier example, we have a system at my school called the Paw Pass system, and that's usually for students who we consider to be like tier 2, which means that they're struggling with something significant and they need that wraparound support. And sometimes that usually happens after a crisis or a big event like a fight or a suspension. And with that Paw Pass system, the teachers are aware that if a student uses that, they are excused to go see myself, a trusted adult, or any one of our administrators who are when they're not busy doing a lot of things on behalf of our school, they'll take the time and meet with the student so that they can have their safe space. Like I remember one student earlier in the year, he in our conversation, I asked him, like, what do you need? Do you need me to give you 5 minutes? He said, yes. I said, okay, I'll give you 5 minutes. I'll do some work. And then at the end of 5 minutes, I'll send you back to class. And it's good to have that boundary too with that, because what we don't want to happen is that, for example, if a student is experiencing a minor inconvenience or a minor slight, they use the Paw Pass. It's like, okay, let's try our moves. Let's do our best so that they can develop that emotional, kind of like that practice while, being okay with learning it, because like anything, it's a skill that has to be practiced consistently over and over again. So that Paw Pass system is healthy. And then sometimes, like for adults will be like, you know what, I need to take some space. I need to lie down. And our response to that can determine whether that person feels supported or unheard. If the person says, okay, cool, or you know what, that's fine, and they're relaxed and they're calm and they're accepting, that's giving that person permission to say, you know what, I need to solve this problem on my own. I need to remove myself. But if it's more like, oh, fine, or there's some undercurrent of not being okay with that, the person can pick up on that, because as humans, we're animals. We can sense things, we can read behavior, we can read patterns, and that's something that I've worked on in different areas of my life, is learning to be okay with that and knowing that that's that person's, like, that's part of their toolkit. Like for some of my students, they need to leave the classroom. They need that 5 minutes. They need that space. Sometimes that space can look like having a conversation. Sometimes it can look like sitting. But I agree, like it's really helpful to develop that as part of your emotional toolkit, because it helps you to build that capacity. It lets you say, hey, I'm human. I have my moments. They're human. they have their moments, and I found it's helpful for me, especially like when I'm feeling overwhelmed at my job. I've started implementing just buy myself time. Like, hey, like I
Mhm.
need like 5 minutes. Sometimes that 5 minutes could be I'm finishing up a meal, or I need to be in a different space because I understand what the student is presenting is tough, and to be ready. And for some, it's just like that, just giving that space without crowding someone. But,
Mhm.
and this is something I've learned with that check in, hey, are you good? Or not even, hey, are you good? Because that can sound like an interrogation. It can be something as simple as, hey, here's some water. Or with a student, hey, do you want to go for a walk? I remember one student last year, talking was not helpful for him. He would go from 0 to 100 in a split second. And I noticed for him, walks were beneficial, and we talked about stuff that he liked. Like, we would admit, like, hey, let's go for a walk. And then we kind of shift the conversation to something fun that the student likes. So for him, it was basketball and different players. Like, I remember a student, he liked John Morant. He was one of his favorite players, and really just trying to like tie that back into that, because sometimes movement is so helpful.
Yeah. And that water bit, that, like, I remember being at a 10, um and someone handed me just a small cup of water, like, the little cone cup, and it kind of like took me from that 10 to maybe a 7.5, just by drinking the water. The coolness of the water, the process of drinking it and swallowing, all of that kind of helped to, like, bring me down a little bit. And so, like, don't don't sleep on the cup of water strategy, because it can be, especially when someone is at a 10.
Yeah.
Like, okay, here's some water. Let's meet a physical need, or a was it philosophical need. Um, and it's like you can, it's so many subtle things you can do to, like, bring that 10 down to an 8 or a 7. But it takes time to learn how to do that. And, I know we often talk about children because the expectation is that children have less access to information. But I'm sorry, being an adult educator, I I can tell you from experience that those same practices have to be used with adults.
Yes, just that simple water, like like sometimes like talk therapy or talking isn't going to help. Sometimes simple actions and just keeping it simple, like, hey, here's some water, or hey, here's a plate of food. Or if they're a person who likes acts of service, hey, I can take this for you. Or if they're someone who likes movement, hey, you want to go for a walk? And
Mhm.
all of those things like fall under mental wellness. I think sometimes like the whole talk therapy just gets conflated with mental health. That's not mental health. Like that is, well, I'm sorry, it's part of it and it's helpful.
Right.
And I want to, if that helps for folks, that's fine. But that's not the only tool in our toolkit
Right.
that we
And
have. Like,
it's, yeah, and it has like a delayed gratification to it,
right.
right? Like, if
Mhm.
you think you're gonna go to one therapy session and you're going to find balance, that's just not true. There's a delayed gratification in that, but these things that we're talking about, these small water, walk, breathing, self-reflection, identifying emotions, all of those things are things that are like instant gratification, even if it doesn't give you the, like, the big wow factor outcomes. It can make subtle impact on how you're feeling, so that you can get closer to your your resolve. And, I love that you talked about the difference between talk therapy, and, how it's, not something that, it's like you said, it's a part of mental health, but and mental wellness, but it's more so of a health care practice than it is mindfulness and like, emotional wellness strategy tool. And when we're talking about crisis management, like in the moment, you can't just, most people can't just call their therapist and be like, hey, let's talk. It's like you got to wait for your appointment or designated time, whereas these things, they're in your toolbox and at your disposal at all times.
Right. And just having, and you said a key word with toolbox. I like to explain that to students like, okay, like, let's build your toolkit and what are some of the things that you like to do and how can we make those as part of your toolkit to use at different times. And even that's something I use for myself. Like I tell students sometimes, if I'm at work, I can't just go for a 2 mile run or a walk on an incline on a treadmill. I'm at work. So it's like, okay, what can I do right now? For some, it could be a religious practice, it could be prayer, it could be offering supplication to the higher power of your choosing. And sometimes, like, that will help. And it's just really figuring out, okay, what do I need in this moment? And it also teaches us too that we can meet our needs. It's not to say that we don't need help from folks or people aren't helpful, but it's how can I try to meet my needs first? And if I'm struggling, okay, who can I reach out to? Like, I like the idea in schools of a trusted adult, trusted friend, and even for adults, like, okay, who's your trusted friend? Who's somebody who can hold this with you and be there for you? Or if, let's say, you're in a pinch, for some people, counting helps. Like you said, skip counting or counting backwards from 100.
Mm-hmm.
And it really helps to bring us down to a level where when we're in that like 7 and below, we're okay, like it's still bothering me. But if we're like, I think there's like two thresholds, like you're calm and then there's hyper arousal where you're just like, I want to fight. The alarm bells are going off. And then hypo arousal where you're just like, okay, I'm freezing. I'm stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And just using those tools and just knowing who you are and what works can help you go from a 10 to a 7 or even a 6.5 and be like, you know what? I will be able to get to a 1 where everything's all hunky dory and great. But I can live with this 6. This 6 is good for me versus staying at above an 8 can really have like long-term impacts because when you have all of that cortisol flooding the body, whether you're a kid or whether you're an adult, long term it's unhealthy and it can lead to bad impacts. But just knowing like those rating systems and knowing, okay, like what can I use at this time? And also giving yourself grace to use those tools.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the good thing is sometimes you don't even have to tell anybody. You can, especially with deep breathing. I remember one time I was going on my way to my internship. I was late. The train was late. It was packed. So I just did some deep breathing and I found myself feeling a lot better. And I thought, you know what? No one has to know on this platform that I'm doing breath work, but it's something available to me in the moment.
Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, some folks probably would need it to breathe with you. Like, hey guys, let's all do some deep breathing. Because especially on the trains, people high tension, stress. I would love to see somebody just break out and be like, hey everybody, listen. I know this train is late. Can we all just do some breath work real quick? As New Yorkers, you're not in New York anymore, but you know the game. But especially in that subway, it don't even be late and I'll be hyperventilating because of the crowd and just the environment, that perception of I'm not gonna get to where I gotta go on time, somebody gonna get on the train acting silly. Like for a long time I couldn't even get on a train after hearing stuff or seeing stuff on myself because I stopped watching the news. But unfortunately, my brain has been hijacked by social media. So even if I don't watch the news, the same things that are on the news are now on social media.
Yeah.
So I can't even run from it anymore. And so for a long time, I was seeing all this stuff about bombs and trains and people getting set on fire. And I built this perception and I built this anxiety around getting on the MTA. And it took me a minute to kind of, talk myself through that these were isolated situations, that just because I'm on the train doesn't mean this is going to happen to me. But, all of this stuff comes with, I just want to, wrap this conversation up with all the things that we talked about today. Like Denise said, come with practice. Try it on. It may not work the first time, may not even work the second time, but if you continue to use these tools, they start to become more helpful for you. And like Denise said, no one has to know that you're using them. If you feel embarrassed or feel isolated, or just a little you don't want anyone to you don't want to be vulnerable in certain spaces, it's fine to do them with yourself. You can go in the bathroom stall, close the door, and take a few deep breaths, or count to yourself. You can count in your head. No one has to know that you're doing it, but I encourage you to invite someone in, because sometimes we think that other people are watching to ridicule. Sometimes they're watching to learn. And that community has always been something that has helped me. And so, I'm an extrovert, but that really doesn't really mean anything according to my readings these days, because you can be an extrovert, introvert, ultravert, all kind of verts. But as someone who's outspoken, I do understand how someone who is more reserved may not use that tactic. But I encourage you to try to build community in the mental wellness space, because you never know who has a tip or tool, or may even need one from you. I want to thank Denixa for joining me tonight and stepping in. We were going to have a conversation about healing from wounds of our fathers, but my guest couldn't make it tonight, so that is going to be rescheduled. But Denixa jumped in and joined this conversation with me about mental wellness and coping. So I hope that you were able to gain some new insight about mental wellness. But the conversation, every Monday Night Chat conversation, always deserves more build up. We're building momentum at every episode. But I hope you learned something new tonight. I hope you were encouraged by our stories and our ways of being, and the tools and tips that we use to keep ourselves grounded. But as always, thank you so much for listening. Denixa, thank you. Do you have any last words to share with the audience tonight?
Sure. Look up mindfulness, and also give yourself grace. If you find something doesn't work, like Aaliyah used to say, try again, and try and find something that works for you. Because if you find something that works for you, chances are you'll stick with it.
And what is your favorite rap song?
Oh man, oh my gosh, there's so many.
One that gets you through the tough times, or any song for that matter. Let me not
yeah. I think if I could think of one song, I would think of Carnival by I'm forgetting the name of the artist. Oh, by Michelle Montano. Really great song for me. It's Soca gets me up and going. I could be in a mood. I hear Carnival, Soca. Right, or even Jump by Ruby. It just brings me to a time where just thinking about happiness and people just celebrating, and that automatically, that's a mood booster for me.
For me, I have a lot too. But one of the things that helps me, when I'm in the gym, I listen to DMX. I love hard rap when I'm really, really stressed or depressed, because it helps me release that rage, but it pushes me. You haven't lived your life if you haven't listened to DMX while on a treadmill. I'm telling you, it'll get you going. You'll be like, okay, stop yelling at me. But my dog's at you like, oh, okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We'll see you on the next Monday Night Chat with SK, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Yep. Enjoy. Tune in next time, folks.
Tune in next time.